In this video, I'm going to go through my exact framework to understanding and learning Spanish verb conjugations without memorizing any charts or any BS. If you don't know me, my name is Hamid. I'm 16 years old and I became a polyglot at just 13 years old after getting fluent in Spanish after the summer of 2022 after only studying for 120 hours. Here's my before and after.
Hola, estoy comiendo comida. Podré comprender shows de español. Para mejorar mi español cuando no tengo mucho tiempo libre para estudiar español, voy a hablar español cuando tengo tiempo libre, pero no sé, no como en serio.
Y pues por si hablo con fluidez ahora y bueno, en este video voy a hablar de mi método para aprender los verbos en español. Bueno, according to an AI analysis of my transformation, that means I saved around 200 to 250 hours compared to the average learner using these methods that I talk about on this channel. And now I'm not going to go through all of them today. I've made many videos. You can just look for my videos. I've made videos going through those. But in this video, I'm going to talk about exactly verb conjugation. So the frameworks I'm going to go through here are the 3 W's is what I like to call them. And then we're going to go through my 3-step framework, okay? Most people find grammar extremely hard and excruciating. And it's because they don't do this exact thing, okay? Now, when I first started learning Spanish, it was around the beginning of 2022. That's when I had the idea, because a guy in my class had started using Duolingo Plus and his Spanish had become better than everyone else's. And he was a bad student. Not a bad student, but he didn't have the best grades. But yet he still, got A's in Spanish and everyone else had a B or something. I had a B and I was a really big nerd. And so this motivated me and pretty much everyone else because since he was also kind of a popular guy and it almost became a trend because it was people in the class started using Spanish learning apps or even the French people in Sweden. If you don't know, you have to pick a third language to study because it's a thing. I don't know. In Sweden, you obviously need to know Swedish and then you also need to know English. And then also you pick a third language. And so even the people who picked French, they were also finding language learning apps and doing them. And so I wanted to find the best way to learn Spanish. And so doing tons of research on YouTube and a bunch of trial and error, trying Duolingo, Babbel, all these different apps, I eventually found a YouTuber talking about language transfer. And it was an audible course which talked about grammar for the most part. And this was the first stepping stone for me to understand grammar. Now, I didn't realize it then, but now I realized that the reason why the grammar that they taught me there was so effective was because it followed the framework of the 3 W's, which is what I'm going to teach you now. So this is what matters when it comes to learning grammar, and this is what the whole 3-step framework, the framework I'm going to give you for understanding verb conjugations without memorization, without any verb charts, why that's so important, what that's sort of based upon. And this way, not only will this framework work in the sense of verb conjugations, but it will apply to every other thing in terms of grammar. And any other thing within Spanish grammar is applied when we're talking about this. Basically, when we're trying to learn grammar extremely effectively, okay? Which is what I did. So I did basically language transfer. I did around 30 hours before the summer. And then I did 1 hour a day during the summer, so 120 hours total. And by the end of that, I was conversationally fluent. In any Spanish sentence, there are 2 parts only. And that is what the words are. So that's the first W. What are the words? We have sentences like puedo ir al baño. You need to know the word puedo, you need to know the word ir, you need to know the word al, and you need to know the word baño, okay? The next part is you need to know where those words are placed, and that's the second W. Where do we place these words? Does puedo come first or last? Does baño come first or last? Where does baño come? And so, if you've memorized that phrase, can I go to the bathroom? Puedo ir al baño. You would know that, okay, I know the words are puedo ir al baño, and I know that's the order in that you say them. People know como estás, and that's the example I give in the presentation. Everyone knows that it's como, and then it's estás, right? Have you heard of ya sabe? Ya sabe. It's people just say things. They say the what and the where, but this is the issue. They have memorized that. They don't understand the third W, which is the why. And that is the biggest constraint you have right now in grammar. I know because I was in your position, app hopping from different apps, watching different YouTube videos for weeks, just wasting my time, okay? The second that I found a grammar tool that actually explained the why, it changed everything. And that's when I had the motivation to make the challenge for myself to get fluent in the summer. And what happened? Of course, I got fluent. And so everyone understands the what and the where. Most grammar textbooks teach the what and the where, but they don't understand the why. And we're going to get into this now, okay? The reason why this is so important is because when you understand the why behind Spanish grammar, behind why it's como estás, why it's puedo ir al baño, then it makes more sense. And when it makes more sense, you remember it better. Here's the thing. Memorizing all those grammar charts can work. I'm not saying it can't work. In fact, anything can work when it comes to language learning. It's just that certain things shortcut the end goal. People have gotten fluent using Duolingo. Like there's a video out there, this guy spent 2,000 hours on Duolingo and he got conversational. Here's the thing. Do you want to put 2,000 hours or 120 hours like I did? I put 120 hours. Of course you'd want to choose the 120 hours. Our time is valuable. If we even value each hour at like $9 an hour minimum wage, that means me saving 200 hours saved me $1,800 worth of time minimum. And so, of course, that's really worth it. That's really valuable. We want to implement that. And so memorization is the act of trying to remember, right? To put it in your memory, right? To memorize. Well, if there's a way to shortcut the time that it takes for us to put things into our memories, aka remember them, well then of course that tool should be used and abused, in fact. And so this is the third W that most people miss. The third W is understanding the why behind the grammar. And this is a process, okay? Understanding a why is a process. Do you remember in 9th grade when you were learning about hydrocarbons and you were learning about the different names for these hydrocarbons? And you realize that methane, methane, and methane, you see a pattern there in how you name the different hydrocarbons. There you have ethane, ethene, and ethine, right? Propane, propene, and propine. Do you see a pattern there? And in my class, okay, no one memorized the chart of all those names. But we found the pattern. And this leads me to the next point, which is pattern recognition. And this is where we go to the root of this issue and this process, okay? So the root of grammar in Spanish, the root of understanding the why, is rooted in pattern recognition. So pattern recognition is exactly how it sounds like. Recognizing a pattern. And a pattern is just a sequence of similar things, if not the same things, okay? For example, if I said red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green, the pattern there is every time I say red or green, then either red or green follows, right? There's a pattern there. Spanish grammar and grammar in general has different patterns, okay? Different regularities, okay? And so when we say understanding the why, it's understanding that these patterns exist and the patterns are the reason for the sentences, okay? This is where you get to these like grammar rules and these like specific parts in language. Now, obviously, those are important to learn and definitely in the future you will have to learn those through grammar textbooks. But the base part is just understanding how Spanish conjugation, verb conjugation works, okay? And it's all based on one concept, which is pattern recognition. Your ability to recognize a pattern in a language and therefore act upon that pattern is your ability when it comes to language learning. Meaning, the faster someone finds a pattern and then implements that pattern, the smarter that person is when it comes to language learning, or the more progress he'll make. As a kid, when you're learning how to walk, you're finding patterns in your brain. Your brain is recognizing the patterns of, if I put my foot here, then this happens. And if I put my foot there, then that happens. And then if I take a step forward, I'm able to go forward and lift my other leg up and then move forward. And now it's a pattern recognition. And now all of a sudden we're able to walk like it's nothing and have our phones like this while talking to someone while still walking. And in the same way, language learning works like that, where you're recognizing a pattern, you're practicing it and implementing it. And then the amount of times that you practice and implement it, the more natural it becomes. And the more natural it becomes, the more you're able to just blurt out Spanish sentences y hablar así sin tener que pensar por mucho tiempo antes de decir lo que quieras. And that's where fluency is based. So the base of fluency, you can almost say, is your ability to recognize these patterns in Spanish, okay? That is where language learning is rooted. And in pattern recognition, the question why is the fundamental question, okay? Let's say you had 3 lives and you jumped off a cliff the first life and you lost that life and then you teleported back onto a cliff. If you presented yourself with the option of jumping off again and your brain told you no, well then you'd ask why? Why shouldn't I jump off this cliff? And then your brain gives you a reason because it's recognized the pattern, which was when we step off this cliff, we die. Therefore, let's not die, right? And it's all rooted in the question why. Why shouldn't I jump off this cliff? because I've recognized the pattern before because of that. Why is it como estás? Well, because I've recognized several patterns to that sentence. And the reason why this is important is when you systemize things, when you create like a code, a system for deciphering how to get to a certain sentence, well, then you unlock several sentences. This is based on what I call the cognate cheat codes as an example, okay? And so I just want to preface this by saying this is the main issue with most grammar textbooks and the Duolingos and everything. The Duolingos will say the difference between es and está is blank. And then it's not an accurate reason, or it's not even explaining where es and está come from, right? The primary reason is, firstly, they're written and not audible, which is automatically bad because we want to have conversations, and I cover what I call the fluency equation many times. You can watch other videos. But also the primary reason is they don't teach the why. So let me prove this to you by what I call the cognate cheat code, and this is going to really show this concept to you. And this is an example of the difference it makes when you understand the why. The word for presentation in Spanish is presentación. Now if I just taught you in this way, presentation equals presentación. Well, then you know the what and the where. You know that it's what, and then I guess we haven't made a sentence with presentación, but you basically know how to use the word presentación, right? But I haven't taught you the why to the what and the where. I haven't taught you how we got to presentación. So now you only know one word. Congratulations. But if I taught you this, that words that end in ation in English are always equal to ación in Spanish, just with the Spanish accent and Spanish vowels, well, now you know 300 words because you've created a system, a logic to Spanish, to the what and the where, right? You've created a process. The process is presentation, ends of ation, so take off the ation, put the ación, and then say it with Spanish vowels. So now we know that abbreviation is abreviación. We know that abdication is abdicación. We know that accumulation is acumulación. We know that administration is administración. We know that admiration is admiración. Do you see the difference here? Most programs only teach you just presentación is presentación. But if I taught you in this way, which I like to call the cognate cheat code, then you learn so much more. And this is actually just a sneak peek in my own fundamentals course, which is in my entire Speech Spanish Academy program, where I teach Spanish using these methods. And if you're interested, you can check the description for that. Where this is how I teach grammar to my students. This is how grammar should be taught, in my opinion. And so the reason why this is so important is because I taught you the why. Not only do you know presentation, but you also know every single ation ending. So instead of learning one word, you now learned 194 words. And this is what I mean by you remember it better. The amount of time that it would take to memorize those 194 words is so much longer. This is so much longer than it would have taken just to find a system, which is the system that I'm teaching you when I teach you the why behind Spanish grammar, okay? This is the reason why, and take this concept right here and apply it to grammar and apply it to verb conjugations. Verb conjugations shouldn't be memorized through grammar charts, but rather through systems. You should be learning verb conjugations through mental systems, not anything that's written down and memorized through your eyes. Okay? And so examples of these are, why is it puedo instead of puedo? Why is it hablas? Why is it me amo? And so now that you understand the importance of this, let's talk about the actual system. So Spanish verb conjugation works like this. Depending on the pronoun, so depending on who is doing what, I eat, you eat, he eats, they speak, etc., the verb ending will change. So here is the process. Here's the step-by-step process, okay? Step 0 is to understand this key principle. There are 2 groups of verb endings. Everyone online says there's 3 groups. That isn't true. That messes up the system. There are 3 verb endings, but there are 2 groups of those verb endings. Okay? Because again, we're finding a system. We're understanding the why. When you just break it down to memorization, then you make it harder for yourself. This is the way. There are 2 groups of verb endings, and there are 3 verb endings. The 3 verb endings are ar, and ir, but the 2 groups of verb endings are ar and ir. This means that the way that these verb endings will behave adhere to their group, meaning and ir verbs will behave the same, and ar verbs will all behave like ar verbs, okay? And there's only one exception in the entirety of Spanish grammar, okay? So step 1 is identify the verb ending, and this way you'll identify which group it's in as well, okay? So look at the verb. Let's take the verb llamar, okay, to call. You look at if the ending is ar or if it's or ir, okay, if it either falls into which group. If it falls into the ar group, then that's the system, okay? you know that it's an adverb group, okay? Then you work from there. Step 0 is finding the verb and then finding the verb ending. That's where you start, okay? The second step is, now that you know which group it's in, if it's in the adverb group or if it's in the eri group, all you have to do is identify who is doing the verb. And so we're talking about which pronoun does the verb, okay? Are we saying that I'm doing the verb? Are we saying that you're doing the verb? Are we saying he does the verb? Is it I call? Is it you call? Is it she calls? Is it I'm calling? Is it they are calling? Who's the one that's calling, right? And then the final step from here, and this goes into the rest of the grammar, is you take off, then add. So either you take off the verb endings and then you add something, or depending on which tense it is, you just add another verb ending depending on the verb group and pronoun. Basically, depending on steps 1 and 2, depending on which verb ending it is and which pronoun that we're trying to say, who is doing the verb, that will change the verb ending that we either add or take away and add. Basically, take away and adding. So let's make some examples here, okay? If we have Jamar, all right, we're trying to say someone calls. We know that there are 2 groups of verb endings, ar and erenir. So first, let's identify the verb ending, right? Is it an adverb or an erir verb? It's an adverb. Excuse my handwriting. All right, so now we want to identify the who. Which pronoun is doing the verb? So I want to say, I call. I know that it's now I. We're using the I pronoun. So I'm trying to say I call. Now we're going to take off, then add, or add, just add to the verb. Now, what tense are we using here? Well, I call is the present tense. Now, for the present tense, the rule is, now I haven't written this down, but step 3 basically tapers off into whatever rule and tense we're using. So right now we're using the present tense. So we're saying I call. Well, the rule is you take off the ar and then you add o for I, right? Like I said, it depends on the verb group and the pronoun. So for adverbs, so the verb group is adverbs. For I, the pronoun I, the rule is you take off the ar and then add an o. So let's try that. So we have Jamar, we take off the ar, we're left with, what are we left with? We are left with Jam, and then we're going to put o to the ending. So now let's say this word, Jamo. All right, I call this Jamo. Boom. So do you see that process? And this enables you with the ability to say different things. So now let's try to say, I call him. What is the word for him? Well, the word for him, and here's the thing, okay? Most programs don't teach the why, so this might be completely different for you. This might be completely new for you. Now, the word for him is lo. Lo. But when we say I call him, it's actually lo jamo. So this means that this lo is put before jamo. Why? That's the question you should be asking yourself. No program out there, basically no program out there, explains why the lo comes before jamo. And this is the difference between programs that implement the 3 W's and don't, okay? From what I've found, it's only language transfer that does that. And also, I've done it in my own course, in the fundamentals course in my Speedy Spanish Academy. The reason why we put the lo, the him, before jamo is because jamo is a changed verb, meaning we've taken jamar and we've changed the ending. We've taken off the ending and we've changed it with something. And the rule is for changed verbs, the second pronoun, aka the thing that receives the verb, comes before the changed verb. Okay? That's the rule. So if I want to say I call myself, the word for myself is me. And so if I want to say I call myself, well then it would be me llamo. And if I want to say my name is, well then how do you say my name is in Spanish? You say me llamo. And so what you're literally saying is, I call myself. I call myself Hamid. Me llamo Hamid. You've heard of me llamo your entire life. Me llamo Hamid, me llamo Eduardo, me llamo Pablo. Well, now you've seen how they got there. There's a list of processes behind how we get me llamo. Okay? And this is the base of the process. It is understanding the verb endings, and then where we go from the verb endings. You know the verb ending, and then you just have to identify who is doing the verb, and then all you have to do is just conjugate it. Now, conjugation, this is what conjugation is. Step 3 is what conjugation is. Conjugation is manipulating the verb ending according to who is doing the verb. Let me repeat that again. Conjugation is changing the verb ending based on who is doing the verb in which tense, okay? And depending on the tense, and depending on the pronoun, and depending on the verb ending, you will end up with a different rule, okay? But it's all a system, a process of starting here, identifying the verb ending, identifying who does the verb, and then going from there. And this is the exact process, okay? This is the gold in this video. Most people just jump right in and just memorize me llamo. But when you go through this process, there's like 5-6 steps before you get to me llamo. Like honestly, there's like 5-6 steps of like grammar concepts to understand before you get to me llamo. The guy who doesn't do that process is fried because he won't be able to repeat that framework now. The guy who has gone through the process can now apply this exact thing that we did here, this llamo, to every single adverb. We now know how we got to llamo, right? Well, now you know how to say everything else. We have the verb hablar, and now we know that we take off the ar, and we put o. Hablo. Ah, so now I understand why it's hablo español, right? We have to present. Presentar. Well, now you know how to say I present. Presento. That's an O, right? So now, just like in the presentación example, instead of memorizing llamo, you have understood the process of how we got to llamo. And therefore, you can repeat that framework across every single adverb that you see, and you'll have a very high accuracy rate. Just like with understanding Asian words become acción, and now you can say abbreviation, presentation, contemplation, narration, administration, literally every single Asian word. And that is the whole goal of understanding the why, okay? And so this was actually just a tiny snippet of my fundamentals course where I go super in detail with this process and help you implement it for yourself. And so if you actually do want to implement these frameworks and finally start learning Spanish in a clear and structured way, then you can check the description or the pinned comment to join the My Speedy Spanish Academy, which I've spent so long creating just for you. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. I would appreciate any feedback or anything. And yeah, stay humble.